Alright man, hello everybody, we're back with more Hades 2 a Warsong update content. Today I want to bring you a quick and dirty Arcana and Fear guide, because a lot of people have been requesting help when it comes to that stuff, and I figured I could pop open the cards, as well as the Testament menu, and just go over and talk about every card, why I use what I use, and why you might want to use what I use, or maybe why you might want to use other cards. I kind of just want to talk about each card and their kind of use cases to give you guys more information so you can kind of make your own informed opinions. I don't really do a lot of guide content because, to be honest, I'm kind of dumb and I just kind of use what I use, and I don't really think a lot of people should do what I do in Hades 2. I'm really glad you guys enjoy watching me play the game, but it's probably best to just discover what works best for you and do not imitate what I do in most cases. But anyways, without further ado, we'll do the cards, the Arcana cards first, and then we'll talk about Fear. So this setup right here is what I use for high Fear surface, any Fear speed runs, and general fun runs. For 50 Fear or just high Fear underworld runs, the one thing I change that I'll talk about first is we drop Lovers, 3 free hits in every boss encounter, and we pick up Artificer. You have 3 chances this night to turn any minor find into a major find. We use this in really high Fear underworld to give you an early game power spike that usually helps you get out of Erebus while beating the timer. It's incredibly important, and you need to make sure you fit this in your Arcana loadout if you consistently time out within Erebus. Otherwise, I don't really use it. In any Fear, it's slow. Any Fear speedruns, that's what I'm saying when I reference any Fear, for those who don't know. And in the surface, you can't really take great advantage of it, because in Ephira, the city, the first location, biome, region, whatever you want to call it, you don't get many minor rewards, so you're not really getting many Artificer hits. It's better just to run Lovers. Besides that, we'll start at the top and work our way down. So first up, we have Sorceress. Your Omega moves are faster, 30% faster. Anytime you're using Omega moves, this is huge. Giving yourself 30% innate channel speed is a fantastic thing to have. And if you have the Huntress Arcana card on as well, you need to use some sort of magic at the beginning of each room to get the damage bonus from this. So having Sorceress on makes it easier to proc or get within the activation condition of Huntress. I don't use Wayward Son, mainly because this setup also activates Divinity. Any boons you are offered have 20% chance to be improved to Epic. The better the rarity, the higher the damage, or the better the effect of whatever the boon has, so it's really good to have. Wayward Son costs exactly 1 grasp, or 1 point, and my other 1 point cards are right here in this first row, and taking either of them off for Wayward would deactivate Divinity. I also just don't need it personally. For most of my low Fear fun runs, I can find healing in other ways or just wait till I get to fountains. And I'm very used to playing with the Vow of Scars on, so not having healing per room is something I'm very used to. However, I do think it's a really strong card, and if you would want to give up boon rarity for the sake of it, I completely understand. A lot of the times I just like boon rarity for videos too, because they make videos more fun when the boons have the highest rarity. Funny colored boons make everyone happy. So you could drop something like Swift Runner, which is just 10% sprint speed, and it allows you to pass right through most dangers in your way, or just enemies essentially. For something like Wayward Son, if you're struggling and you do not have the Vow of Scars maxed out, which reduces your healing to 0%, I would recommend turning this on instead. I like the sprint speed, I like being able to pass through enemies, I like Divinity personally. I don't ever feel like I need Wayward Son. It is a really strong card. Then we have Huntress. While you have less than 100% of your magic, your attack and special deal 50% damage. This is a pretty good card. You'll see throughout that a lot of these cards are just really, really strong and essentially just better options than the ones we have turned off. And that's more so the reason we use them and not these. It's not that these cards are bad, it's just there's better options. So for Huntress, it only applies to your regular attack and your regular special damage, nothing else. And you need to use some sort of magic in every room to get on it. And it's very hard to fit in with the 30 points that we have, so I usually don't take it. However, if you find most of your damage is coming from your regular attack or your regular special with whatever aspect you are using, you could definitely take it instead of one of these other cards. It is a strong card, you just can't fit it in when it comes to the rest of these cards. So that's why I don't use it a lot of the time. On any Fear speedruns specifically, if I'm using a non-magic oriented aspect, I'll usually drop Persistence and then pick up the Huntress for even more damage. But for high Fear and any magic aspect, I will just use Persistence for the extra HP and extra magic. Then we have Eternity. This was an old card that has returned as of this patch. While you channel your Omega moves, everything moves slower for 1.2 seconds. I will admit, if you're using an Omega aspect, this is super safe. So if you're struggling in terms of getting hit, you could put this on instead of something else. However, it does cost 3 Grasp, which is quite a bit. It's very expensive. You would have to drop like Lover Shields in bosses, maybe Origination, and then play like Eternity Huntress. You could also drop like Furies, but that's 30% global damage to any foe in your cast, and then something like Swift Runner. And then you could play Eternity. That also turns off Queen and Divinity then, which we'll talk about in a bit. So that's why I don't use it, but it is a pretty strong card. The Moon is just a card that gets activated by having a card next to it on, one of these 3 right here, and it makes your Hex charge up faster. Hexes are pretty weak in the current metagame, and they always have been. They really need a good amount of like rebalancing and kind of refocusing. So activating this card just usually isn't worth it, because you'd have to turn on Night, Unseen, or Eternity. So that's why that's not on. Furies is absolutely fantastic. 30% global damage to any foe in your cast. This means anytime you cast, which you should always be casting your enemies, keep them rooted, keep them slowed, keep them spaced out from you. They will take 30% more damage from all sources, which means Blitz, which means percent attacks, which means whatever little damage you have, Static Shock, Rapture Ring, Arctic Gale, whatever it is, 30% bonus whenever they're in your cast. Pretty fantastic card. Persistence, more HP and magic. Always a great card for just 2 cost. We're not playing Messenger. I do say I like this card. Once again, it's just like impossible to fit in. This loses out on Divinity. This loses out on Divinity. I would never drop 30% Omega move speed for the sake of Messenger, but it is a fun card. I do really like it. I actually wish I could have it on. It just doesn't work out with the current Arcana loadouts. Having the 70% extra move speed and a few iframes on cast is pretty good. So once again, the goal of this guide is not to tell you what to use, but informing you about each card, why I use what I use, and why you may or may not want to use that card. Unseen, this only restores 6 magic per second for 5 cost. It is not worth it at all. 6 magic per second is pretty weak regen overall compared to most magic regens in this game, especially with Ares introduction giving you another great one. Mortal Gain, Born Gain, Ionic Gain, even Glamour Gain and Epic is 10 a second. So once you get a magic regen, if you're playing a magic aspect, it's just like better than Unseen. And for 5 cost, it's just not ever really worth it. Night, I will say 2 cost. If you're doing an Omega run and you're rotating Omegas, Omega attack, Omega special, you will have 15% crit on each. So it is really good for just 2 cost. And if you are finding yourself rotating Omegas, you could definitely turn it on. I just never do that, so I don't have it. But in terms of all the cards we've covered so far, just like Huntress, it is a pretty solid one that if you are rotating Omegas, you might want to turn on. Swift Runner is really just for Divinity here. 10% sprint speed is nice. Being able to pass your enemies when you sprint is actually really nice. That's a new thing they added this patch. However, yeah, it's really just for Divinity here. And the other 1 point, like I probably would play Messenger maybe over Swift Runner, but Swift Runner plus Divinity for me kind of beats just raw Messenger, so that's why we do that. No Death Defiances because we play Strength. You have to play one or the other. Strength only works with no Death Defiances, so you can't really play both well. You can, and you'll get Strength once you lose all your Death Defiances, but it's better to just save the 4 cost, play Strength, have the damage reduction and damage right away, not play Death Defiances. Although they are good, Strength is more damage and damage resistance, but Death Defiances you can refill, right? They're a refillable resource, even if you have max Vow of Scars on, so you have no healing. That, and you can't take over damage from them, so if you have 1 HP left and a Death Defiance, and you take 100 damage, you're only taking 1 damage, right? Whereas if you get hit for 100 damage on Strength, you're taking 50 damage, point blank period, at every time. There's no question about it. Next up, Centaur. This just gets activated through other cards, activating at least a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 cost card. It's nice to have. You get health and magic every so often throughout a run. Origination is big. you find 2 curses from your Olympians, and you're gonna get a bonus 50% damage to all foes. And that is all damage sources again, just like Furies, which is really nice. So at 5 cost is quite hefty, but for 50% bonus damage from all sources, very, very good. And it's one thing you should always be playing around, is finding 2 curses throughout a run. Lover Shield, a great defensive tool. Every single boss encounter, you're going to get 3 free hits that aren't going to deal damage. So a Typhon head slam that usually does like 90 damage on strength could just get eaten up by a barrier. Great value, great card. 3 cost is quite a bit. And I do drop it personally on 50 Fear because I desperately need Artificer. But when I'm playing Surface, and if I can get it on, I do like to have it because it's a great card. Just makes bossing that much easier, right? Because even if you go into a boss at low health, if you have solid boss mechanics, you can just say, well, I got 3 free hits, and then I got maybe 1 or 2 more hits with my low health, and I can probably eke out a run with that. Whereas if you don't have them, you're like, I gotta play this one perfectly. That's a shame. Next up, we have the full reroll corner. I'll talk about kind of in sync because they all work together. And there's an activation condition down here. So Enchantress, you get 3 rolls, and you can now roll doors, essentially. You can flip a door from a menu to a non-menu. You can flip a door from a god you don't want to see to a god you do want to see. Really strong card. Then you have Boatman, 300 gold for 5 cost. Not really that great overall, right? So you wouldn't turn it on if it wasn't for Fates. But if you activate all surrounding cards, which is Boatman and Champions, you get another 4 rerolls. So Boatman is essentially 300 gold and an extra 4 rerolls that can be used on doors and on boons if you have Champions. So that is pretty worth it in tandem. So you get 300 gold, meaning the first time you ever hit a shop, whether you have Vow of Debt maxed or Vow of Debt not on, you will be able to afford it. And now with Travel Deal, if you don't have Vow of Debt on, you can buy 2 boons guaranteed right away in your first shop, which is pretty sweet, I will say. And then you have Champions to grab you another 3 rolls and allow you to roll boons to make your runs much more consistent, being able to find exactly what you need at all times. And then, yeah, that activates Fates, which is pretty sweet. You get another 4 rolls, and since you have both Champions and Enchantress on, you can use them on both location and boon rewards. Artificer, like I said, not really necessary for any Fear speedruns. It's kind of slow to use. For just fun runs, if I could turn this on, it is pretty great because it's just extra major rewards. Could get you another boon, could get you some extra HP, some extra magic, some extra gold. Pretty fun card. It's good. 3 cost. It's pretty worth it, I will say. It's pretty much necessary on High Fear since you have the Vow of Bitterness on, taking away a boon per region. And since your timer is so harsh, getting that early game power spike if you hit a Daedalus Hammer or if you hit an extra boon can quite literally decide your run, which is pretty fantastic. Next up, we have Excellence. Any boons you are offered have a 50% chance to be improved to rare. For 5 cost, just to get a 50% chance at a rare boon, it's just never worth it compared to some of these other crazy hitters. So I can't recommend that card really ever. The Queen, it's really nice to have this awakened. This setup does it. It just gives you better duo chance, which is always fun. Who doesn't love duo boons, right? Pretty great. I already spoke about Fates and Champions. Then we have Strength, which we touched on. While you have no Death Defiances, you take 50% less damage and deal 25% more. This card was absurdly broken last patch because it also applied to armor. They have nerfed it since. You are also able to use the engraved pin with this completely. They have nerfed that as well, so when you put on the engraved pin now, it takes away your strength and it's only active during the 10 seconds of engraved pin invulnerability. So, although I do still think strength is better for people who are very confident in themselves, it's more or less like a high confidence versus thick skin Hades 1 situation in my opinion now, where if you're looking for more defense, I probably would recommend Death Defiances, but if you're very confident in your abilities and you want that extra damage, you should definitely play Strength. Death Defiance is once again a refillable resource and you don't take over damage, and you can play the engraved pin very well with them. Whereas Strength, you do get more damage, you do get damage resistance. It does not apply to armor anymore. You can't use engraved pin, but it's still overall very strong. I quite enjoy it because it's like high risk, high reward, and that's kind of my thing. That's kind of my vice in video games. Kind of just love degenerately gambling in video games because I'm smart enough not to do it in the real world at least, but in video games I can't get away from it. So I do love playing Strength. But if you're struggling, I would recommend trying out some Death Defiances and using the engraved pin. Then up Divinity, just 20% chance for, you know, rarity. It's cool. I like activating it. It's fun to get the red heroic boons when you have a keepsake and you hit an epic, or just getting a bunch of epic boons. Is it necessary? No. Can it really help on certain boons because they have really strong rarity scaling? Yes. Do you need it to win runs? Absolutely not. Is it a lot of fun? Definitely. The dopamine you get from just, you know, hitting the epic boon is pretty fantastic, so that's why I always try to have it on, since it is technically free with an awakening condition. And then Judgment. I mean, this card's just a meme. We do entire runs around it for fun. It is really cool. You can only have like 2 or 3 cards active at a time. And then after every boss, you're going to activate 5 at random, so just more gambling. But overall, if you're taking runs seriously, you're never going to touch this card, realistically. Just doesn't really make sense. So that's it for the Arcana cards. Figured we'd hop over to Fear now. So for Fear settings, I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to talk about each one. I am not really going to recommend an actual Fear setup because I think Fear is highly preferential to each person, what they like, what they dislike, Underworld versus Surface. I'm going to go through them and just like I said, give you guys information so you can make your own informed opinions. We'll start at the top with Pain. I will give you my general recommendation when to turn this one on. I can give you like a general cookie cutter 32 Fear setup. Maybe we'll do a 16, 24, 32, 40, 50 progression, I guess. Yeah, we can do that, sure. Anyways, Vow of Pain. All foes will deal 100% extra damage, 5 Fear. I don't recommend turning this one on for a long while. Making enemies deal more damage is not a fun thing. Everything on the surface already does 1,000,000 damage. Why make it do 1,000,000 plus an extra 100%? Vow of Grit. This one's pretty calm. The biggest barrier here is it just gives bosses more HP. So if you're not really great at bosses, they're all going to have 30% more HP now, which can be quite scary, especially when they have a lot of HP as well. Like Typhon. I think he has like 65,000 base. This might make it go up to like 85k or something ridiculous like that. I don't know if the math all checks out there. I'm not going to bother to do it right now. But it's not too bad overall. Will impact your timer slightly. A lot of the other vows are a lot more grim, so you're going to take this one quite often. It's really not bad. Vow of Wards. This sucks. Every enemy has 2 barriers before you actually start chipping away at their HP. It makes really slow attack speed weapons that much worse. It also makes you play differently and hunt for different boons because you want to break barriers as quickly as you can. So I don't really recommend this one for a while. Vow of Frenzy. This is enemy attack speed. You do get a ton of Fear out of this one, which is pretty absurd. 6. But enemies attacking faster is definitely a problem. 20% at the first level, 40% at the second level. Probably wouldn't turn this on for a while, but I would turn this on before Wards and Pain. We'll leave it off for now, we'll come back to it. Vow of Hordes. This one's fine if you're not using any time pressure. You just have to fight more enemies. But at the same time, fighting more enemies, if you're already struggling, probably isn't a great idea. And once you turn on time pressure, the Vow of Time, giving you a certain amount of time to go through each region, it's really not a good time. See what I did there? Anyways, yeah, don't turn this one on for a while, I would say. We'll come back to it. Menace isn't too bad. At the max level, it's only a 25% chance, and it does net you 3 Fear. Most foes have a 25% chance to be from the next region. So if you're down in Erebus, or if you're in the city on the surface, you have a 25% chance for an enemy to spawn in from the Rift of Thessaly, or from Oceanus. There is some pretty grim hits on that, like hippos being in your Erebus, and lurkers. But at the same time, for 3 Fear, if your goal is to push Fear, it's really not so bad. Revenants from the Vow of Return. This only gets you 2 Fear. They're quite annoying, and they can ruin your positioning quite a bit, because you have to chase down these Revenants whenever they spawn, and if you don't get them within 5 seconds, they're going to respawn, and you have to refight that same enemy, which can hurt your timer quite a bit. There has been a lot of quality of life changes to Revenants, and they're not as nearly as annoying as they were in the past, which is great. But I wouldn't turn it on quite yet. Both the Vow of Return and the Vow of Frenzy aren't things I would start out with very early on, but they're also not nearly as bad as Wards and Pain, so it's more of like a mid-tier vow that we'll come back to in a little bit. The Vow of Fangs is a new vow in the last couple patches. It does get you a lot of Fear. It is pretty brutal. It got nerfed this patch, luckily, which was cool, because there were some combos last patch that if just spawned into the game, you would probably die, and you didn't have much like counterplay to. It's still not perfect, but it's not nearly as miserable as it once was. Wouldn't turn it on quite yet. There's definitely stuff I would turn on beforehand, but it's not so bad. Vow of Scars. A lot of people don't like this one. It just removes your healing effects. It does net you 4 fear. It's not really that great. I don't mind it, but that's just because I'm so used to playing with it now. Definitely wouldn't turn it on again quite yet. It's once again just kind of like a mid-tier vow, I would say. Not so bad once you learn to play around it. You could also just not turn it all the way up and you still get 50% healing, which is cool. Vow of Death's pretty free. It kind of kills like some fun runs because, you know, everything costs twice as much. Or 80% as much, sorry. Not twice. But to net you fear, if your goal is to push it, you should probably play with it. And it's a good learning curve to get used to your shops just being more expensive. It's not so harmful. You just get like 1 or 2 less boons throughout a run. Vow of Shadows. It makes your mini-bosses kind of miserable. It makes the summit on the surface kind of tough, like the Tail of Typhon fight just has really annoying like little enemies that shoot projectiles at you the entire time thanks to this thing. But it does steal you 2 free fear, and it only impacts mini-boss rooms. So, pretty solid one to turn on early. A Vow of Forfeit. This one stinks, and it's literally the main reason you're going to want to use Artificer on really high fear. The first boon in each region will become a red onion instead, so you're already -1 boon every single region from this thing. And in some regions, that means you might just not get like a boon throughout the entire region, looking at you, Oceanus and Thessaly. So, I definitely wouldn't turn this one on for a while. Vow of Time isn't bad. I actually recommend people like crank this thing to all holy heck early on to get used to it, because it's just a timer. And if you can play around the timer, you're stealing so much free fear, like 6, which is crazy to think about. If your goal is to like do your testaments even, 6 is like so much, 6 out of 20, for example. Man, I gotta do my testaments. I've been doing 16 fear fun runs. I've been fumbling the bag. We should put those up to 20. Anyways, yeah, timer 2 is like pretty generous, I have to say. And a lot of people should definitely learn to play around this. It's really not bad, even for fun runs, in my opinion. Timer 3 can be tough, I will say. And the jump from timer 2 to timer 3 is like night and day, which is why it costs 3 fear. But I think timer 2 is like a really good spot to get comfortable with. So I definitely recommend, if your goal is to add some fear to your gameplay, get comfortable with at minimum timer 2 and start working on timer 3. Because it will just basically become free fear once you're comfortable with it. And learning how to like pause buffer and where timer pauses and not getting pressured under time and not worrying about it too much, stuff like that. Vow of Void, this is the hardest vow in the game. It just reduces your Arcana, the grasp from your Arcana. These are usually the last 5 we turn on, so when we play 50 fear, you're usually not touching this. So, I don't know, just continue to not touch it, please. It's miserable, and probably shouldn't even be a thing. So we'll just ignore that one. Next up we have Hubris. After you choose a boon, prime so much magic for each rarity greater than common. If you're not using a magic aspect, this doesn't really matter, and it's just 2 free fear. If you're using a magic aspect, you have to click magic every so often and probably just like play Hecuba like you should be anyways. But it's pretty free fear. Definitely recommend turning it on early. Next up we have Denial. This one's a little scary, especially if you want like a ton of boons from one god, because you have to really like play around the boon pool properly. They made it now in the codex, you can see which boons you deleted and which boons you haven't, which is a lot nicer, so you don't have to kind of like pencil meta write everything down if you're really sweating out a run. But you do want to be careful. It is pretty much 2 free fear as long as you don't delete a boon you desperately need. If I see 2 boons I desperately need from one god, I always just roll past the menu and hope I can see one, and then I'll see the other later. Overall, I would flick it on early. This 17 is like pretty healthy and not that punishing. At this point, I would probably say learn attack speed? Yeah, like I said, I don't know if this is really correct, and please let me know if you share a different opinion down in the comments below. Not only will it inform me better for how to do these guides, but you might give someone else really good advice that was looking for some aid that I couldn't give them. So do that, please. Don't be scared to speak up and, you know, tell me why I'm wrong, because to be honest, I'm probably wrong. But if I'm at this point, playing with enemy damage, not that fun. Playing with wards, miserable. Playing with enemy attack speed, at least they don't hit like a truck quite yet, so it's not so bad. Hordes, once again, really impacts your timer. Return really impacts your timer. Fangs and Frenzy is probably next here. Scars as well, I would say. So you could learn like 1 Frenzy, and then when you're comfortable, go 2 Frenzy. Maybe learn 1 Fang, and then learn the Fangs combos. And then when you've done that with full healing, you might want to like start to learn how to play with just reduced healing. So I'd probably jump up to that. Hey, look, we got 30 fear already. That's not bad. Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. The rest of these are pretty miserable vows. At this point, if you get here and you're full frenzy and comfortable, full fangs and comfortable, I would say maybe use Vow of Return so you can learn to play around Revenants.
I swear it.
Maybe Revenants should come in a little bit earlier because they do impact your positioning, how you're going to play a room, how you're going to run around and stuff. But you're still on timer 2 here, and you've flicked up to 32 on Revenants. You still have healing, so you don't have to play full scars. You don't have full timer, so you shouldn't have to worry too drastically about timing out, no matter what you're doing. We're learning how to do Revenants. We're learning how to play on max attack speed. We're learning the Fangs combos, all the other easy stuff. Once we get here, me personally, I think this is where you take the final Scars leap and learn how to play around no healing effects. There is pseudo healing effects, max HP, the Centaur Arcana card giving you HP every so often, Luckier Tooth, Engraved Pin, Death Defiances, refilling those back up, are all ways to actually heal, picking up Ash. So it's not like there is actually no healing, it's just healing effects are 0% effective. That's probably next in my opinion. We're at 34 now. I guess I said I was going to do 60 and 24, but this is just the progression I guess I'm thinking of. On the spot, on the fly. Then I think it's time. Get used to that timer, baby. Gotta get that timer 3 in there. That's probably up next for me if I'm thinking. After that, I don't know. Wards and forfeit are pretty rough. If you're going at this pace now, maybe throw on pain. Because you don't have the crazy, insane, annoying wards and forfeit or hordes yet. Enemies are going to start to deal more damage, and you're getting used to timer. That doesn't seem so bad. I like that. Okay. Now if I'm here, I probably learn how to play around the onion. Because that's going to slow your time down a lot, and that's new. And you have to learn how to deal with all this and onion. Then once you're comfortable with onion, you probably play wards. Learn 1. Once you're comfortable with that, learn 2. And then after that, if your goal is to climb 50, I'd say go hordes 1, 2, 3. Hey, we're at 50. And then, hey, if you really want to swing for the fences, then it's just void, baby. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's probably the order I would do it in. I think that's pretty solid. Also, my general advice, like if people always ask me, hey, Boded, I really want to clear 50 fear. How should I practice for 50 fear? Go play it. Enjoy it. Understand it's hard. Understand you're not supposed to succeed at first. Understand making mistakes is how we learn. Understand it's a video game and you're just supposed to enjoy it at the end of the day. So if you're doing it and get frustrated, I'd recommend stopping. Go out, smell the roses, enjoy your life. Come back when you want to play some more tough, challenging gameplay and just set small goals for yourself, right? Like if you've never gotten out of Erebus on 50 fear, don't say you want to beat 50 fear. Just say, I want to get to Oceanus today. Or I want to see Hecate today. That's my general recommendation. Baby steps. Anyways, that's pretty much it for my Arcana and Fear Gut. I hope it helped some of you. Gave you some information you didn't have. Got some insight from what I do, why I do it. So anyways, alright man, thank you all for watching and supporting the channel. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. It really does help me out a lot. And if you want to keep up with more of my Hades 2 Warsong update content, please consider subscribing to the channel. We'll also be doing general strategy guides for 32, I don't know, maybe 40, maybe 50s on the Underworld and Surface. For those looking to clear 32s on both, let me know down in the comments below if you'd enjoy that. Let me know down in the comments below if you want any other sort of guide or tip content. And yeah, I'll catch you in the next one. Okay, bye. And a massive thank you to my members for supporting the channel.